Today we're going to be taking a look at how to create parameterized fields on a GraphQL service. I'm going to be implementing this using Graphql-kotlin. It's a library that I use in production right now, and I've enjoyed using it. It makes creating and expanding and adjusting a schema really easy. So let's just get started and take a look at the project overall. So we've actually got a couple of projects kind of intersecting here. There's a Kotlin project that defines the service and the GraphQL schema. And then we have a UI project, which is just going to be a really small React application that's going to load the data from GraphQL. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at what we've got in the GraphQL service. And I'm actually going to use IntelliJ to work with that. I usually use VS Code for most languages that I'm working in, but for JVM languages, I find that IntelliJ is a real benefit. It makes a lot of different things easier. So I've got this GraphQL handler, which takes any requests that go to the GraphQL endpoint and then maps them to the schema. And we've got a lot of boilerplate code in here, but essentially, like, I've just got this list of query services that I'm going to be handling different requests with. And we've got a hello world query here just to check to make sure that the service is working. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at that. So to work with GraphQL, I'm actually going to be working with a Firefox plugin called Altair. So this plugin lets you write queries, store them, export them. It makes it really easy because you can export the queries that you're making to either a file or just like a text blob, and then you can share that as part of like a pull request so that if you want to have instructions for how to recreate it, or test recreation or manual testing instructions, sorry. So let's just make sure that the endpoint is working. This is on port 5000, I'm pretty sure. We go to GraphQL. Okay, so it looks like, yep, we've got hello right here. Docs are loading. So let's run query. All right, there it is. Hello world. So what I want to, this is great that the service is running, but we want to do something a little bit more interesting here. That is parameterize a field. And what we're going to do is we're going to add just a simple images query that always returns the same result, but includes just like the title of an image and then the URL. So to do that, let's create a new query. So going to call it, just keep it simple. We're just going to call it the image query service. Always like to have reference files open no matter how small they are. So GraphQL Kotlin's really nice because you just have to create a simple class, and unless you specify otherwise, all public functions will be added as an endpoint. So we're going to call this fetch image. And we want to return some data type, so let's actually back up here and let's make a image. Yeah, let's just call it image. Data classes are kind of interesting in Kotlin. They implement a bunch of like boilerplate methods like comparisons, equality, copies. So that's pretty nice. So let's do image. So we'll have a title, and that's going to be a string, and then we have URL, and that's going to be, that's also a string. All right, and that should be that. What's the problem here? Oh, right, sorry. So val This means that those values aren't going to change. They're essentially constants. All right. And then so this is going to just return a new image. Yep. We're going to call it title. That's going to be first image. And the URL for now is just going to be some URL. All right. Cool. So this is saying it's not being used, but it also says that over here. But that's okay. It's being used in reflections, and the IDE is not able to tell that, which is fine. Okay. So we're going to add the service we just created to the schema by adding it as a top-level object in the query, queries list, that is. All right. So we have image query service here, create a new one. All right. And so let's restart the service. Take a look at Altair. Okay, so we're started up. Looks like there's a problem with my my make file. It doesn't want to rebuild after there's been changes to the Kotlin files. I might have to check the dependencies on that later. Okay, so we've got some bug here, or we've got some error here. I copied this over from some other project, and this is the wrong namespace, so I need to update that namespace. Let's see where that's being used. Okay. So the GraphQL, the schema configurator actually requires you to name which namespace you're working in. Actually should be com.arthariso there. All right. Whatever. Okay. So, make clean again. So I'm just gonna run a clean before I do this every time then, since it's being touchy. Let's reload. All right, so we've got fetch image here. Let's take a look. We want to get all the fields. All right, and our first image, and we've got some URL. Those aren't super interesting though. So let's actually get a real image going on in here. Okay. I've got an image in this project under this static directory, and I've actually got a couple of them here. So this is the Zugspitze, which is if you don't know, it's the tallest mountain in Germany. And it's a place that I went to a few times as a really young kid with my family. My family lived there for a while, so it's always got a little special place in my heart because it reminds me of vacations with my Oman Opa. But all right, well, we are going to just return that image in here then. So this is the URL. Static Zugspitze original. All right, that should be fine. And then we're just going to call it Zugspitze at sunrise. Okay. Very simple, nothing too complicated here. We should just expect to see the new title and URL come through here. Okay, great, got that. So let's actually get the image displaying in an HTML file now. As I mentioned before, I have this other project sitting side by side here, which is a Typescript project. So this already has the Apollo client looped in here. We've got that connecting to our endpoint. I believe this should actually be 5,000. Is that correct? Yeah, so we're connecting to 5,000, so that should be 5,000. Oh, I don't have my dependencies installed, so let me just PMI. Okay. It says that's not installed, so let's get that running, and then we'll get that up and actually doing stuff. Okay, so we want to do a little bit more than just have this hello tag in here. So we've got the Apollo client, which is good. So I'm actually going to do a query component here. Actually, first, I'm going to write the query out. So we've got another nice thing about using a program like Apollo is like you can write the query out and then you can just copy it and then use it in your client application. So we've got, this is going to be our image query. For these, I always append GQL as a suffix, and you'll see why in just a second. Cool. So we've got the image query GQL in there, and so I actually also like to generate the types for this using Apollo's type generator. And so just a quick tip. This took me a little bit to figure out, but Apollo actually won't generate unless you name the query. So I'm actually going to name it here. And so I'm calling it image query. And that's why I use this GQL suffix here a lot, is just to distinguish it from this primary query. So I've got image query in there. And now if I do this Apollo generate, this is another reason to use make tasks, is like you can use these longer commands, and you just have to configure it one time, and then you can just run it. I mean, there are other options out there for like, especially in the JavaScript world, there's a lot of build tooling. I don't know what's popular right now. Looks like we've got a bit of an error. Oh, it's targeting the wrong endpoint. So let's check out the makefile. This should be 5,000. Run it again. With makefiles, you don't have to have some binding to a new sort of build system, because it's not exactly Bash, but it's easier to get command line tools to work together when you can figure out how to work with them through make. So I would definitely advocate learning how to use make. Okay. Loading Apollo project. Let's see. Do we have any schema types? Global types. All right. So let's see what's in here. Nothing in global. Oh, but we do have image query. And so these are the types that are loaded in, that are generated by Apollo. And then now we can use these to make sure that we have the right types coming in. So we have image query, fetch image. That's the name. This is the name of the actual query that we're running. So that's a subtype of that. All right, let's make it work. So we've got that now. And let's make our query. Let's parameterize it with image, I believe it's lowercase, image query. Okay. And then it wants a query, right? So we give it image query GQL. All right. And then we have result. And inside of result, we have data, which is maybe undefined. If let's actually pick it out of here. So what do we get? We got loading, we got data, we got error. I'm actually not going to use error. Usually I handle the error with an error boundary, which is essentially like a component that catches errors and displays them at different levels of your hierarchy. I might do a different video demonstrating how that works, but those are super useful. So if we are loading, just going to return h1 loading. Okay. If we if no data, then just say no data returned. And then here, so now data should be defined, and it should be image query. If it's not, it shouldn't be there, right? Okay, so data dot, yeah. So we've got fetch image on there. Let's keep it simple. So let's just do React fragment. And then I'm just going to do image, source, data, fetch image, URL, alt. Actually, we can pick it out now. So URL, and then title. Okay, don't need that. And then we're just gonna have H2 title. This is pretty awful, like, choices and components, right? Like, you'd probably want to use something a little bit more, you know, semantic for what you're actually displaying here. But this video is not about like how to properly display images. It's about showing how to parameterize those. All right, so what we should see now is we should see the images actually be displayed in the page. There's be a loading, a point when it's loading, and the point when there's no data returned. So let's actually run the web application. So what do we have? All right, yeah. Run webpack dev, that should be us. And we should be at local 9000, bundle built. Let's open, or let's just copy the link. Bring it in here. No data returned. Why is that? Try it again. Oh, okay. Oh, it's not. It still doesn't have the right endpoint. So let's go to our Apollo client. This should have GraphQL on there. All right, we've rebuilt. All right, it's got Zug Spitze sunrise. So we're not seeing. Well, that's wrong. That should be showing the alt tag if it can't fetch the image, but right, we were just putting title in there. So now we should see, yep, Zug Spitze sunrise. So it's not able to actually get the image, right? So it's 404 because Webpack wants everything to be in this dist directory. So I actually need to have a make task for doing that. So we've got HTML pages here as a dependency of that. So let's actually just do one. So it's in the static directory. So let's call it static files. And this phony directive right here just says that this command doesn't generate a file, so it will just be run every time. So we're doing static, and then we're putting that in static. Yeah, we're just copying it there. So let's try running it a couple times and make sure that it doesn't keep nesting it, right? So make static files, right? So now they are in there, right? Okay, let's run it again. All right, as expected. Great, so now when we reload, yep, you see the full Zug Spitze image. Okay. Right, so we've got the image loading, so I'm actually gonna, so we have the image query service, let's get that in there, we added it to that. So let's just say add image service to GraphQL schema. And then the next thing we did was we connected it to, so we connected the client to the service. And we had to make sure that the URL was correct. Connect client to correct GraphQL endpoint. Okay. And then the next thing we did was, so we added the image query and loaded it in. So let's do that. And we added the types here at the same time. So display or load GraphQL data into client application. Okay. And now we are actually make Zugspitze image available to Webpack Dev. Okay. All right. So we've got that working, but we still don't have a way to display the different, the different image sizes. And this one's way too big. So let's try adding a parameter to this, right? Okay. So go to the service, right? And so we need to add image size, right? And we're going to start just by making it a string. I'm going to make it optional. And what that means is that you don't have to specify it, but if you didn't have this question mark here, a query would be required to provide this parameter. But in our case, I don't think that's super necessary. So now I need to make this function a little bit more complicated, and I don't want to just do it in a single expression. So I'm going to, or a single statement. So I'm going to expand this out a bit. And it's going to be returning an image. Okay. Return that guy. Okay. So this image is still, this is still compiling. Right. So let's say that we're going to make this a default to, right? Let's say it defaults to original. And then we're just going to use it, image size, use that here. And if you're not familiar with Kotlin's string interpolation, any string, you can add a local variable in it just like this. It's similar. This might be more familiar if you're used to JavaScript or, in my case, Typescript string templates. But you can omit these braces right there and get the same effect. Okay, so we need to rebuild our GraphQL service. Okay, right? Do we have it? Right. So now if we take a look at Altair, we should see an update to the docs. Okay. Yep. Now it takes an argument image field, but we don't have to specify. Oh, it has it as null. So there's an error here. It should show original. So let's go back. So this is obviously not behaving as I expected. So let's do val image size used, and then have it be image size, and then we'll default to original here. Okay. Oh, this colon. Make this image size used. Okay. Is that good? Rebuild and run the service again. All right. So Zoox bits original. Okay, so it's still loading. We have a parameter. So let's actually try and use the parameter here. It was called image size. So we'll make it image size down here in the variables. And we want, I can't remember, I believe it's called small. So let's call it small. Add it up here. So let's say it's called image size, right? It needs a dollar sign. It's the string, and it's required. So that's fine. And let's actually make it a little bit more descriptive. No, that's fine. Yeah, it's image size, and then this is image size, and that's taking the variable we just put in there. All right, cool. There we are. That's what we need. So let's apply it to the client application. Let's just take this right here because we still need the query name. So let's go to app, replace the query, just the body of it. Okay, so we've got the variable in there. Let's regenerate the types and see what comes out. It does take a little bit of time, but that's okay. All right, so we've got our variables, and this is actually what we want, right? Like the variable is not required on the server. Okay, so it can be string or null. So that's good. That's good. All right, so let's parameterize these again with the image query variables. So now we can actually add the variables. Image size, okay. Actually, let's leave it null just to see what it looks like first. Failed to compile. Oh, this is annoying. So like when you regenerate the types, it doesn't seem like the dev server reloads those files. So the image query variables is a new type in this file, but although Visual Studio Code recognized it, the Webpack dev server did not. That's fine. Okay, this is still loading, the same size. So like, let's try loading in the small one. Okay, great, cool. All right, let's actually save this here because this is doing what we want. Right, so parameterize image query with string. All right, cool. And so some like basic thing we might want to do is just have the image size change when we click. So let's actually add some state here. So no props, and then we're going to call it image size just for convenience. String. Okay. Close that off. Then we set the state here. It's public. I mean, ideally, state would be a private variable, but it's defined by the React library, which is JavaScript, so it has to be public. Image size, and we are going to default it to small. And this is going to use this .state.image size. Okay. Still working? Good. All right, so let's let's make a function to toggle it. So private toggle image size, and then I'm gonna use this arrow function because when you assign it to an event listener, you can it'll sometimes change the value of this, which is definitely a cool feature of JavaScript that everybody loves. All right, so new image size, image size small, then it's going to be original, otherwise small. Right, so it's just going to toggle between those two. Then we set the state, image size, new image size. Okay. And we are just going to toggle that on click here. All right, should work. All right, cool. And if we look at our network activity, we can see, oh, that's interesting. Oh, it's because it's being cached. Okay, that's fine. So the first couple of requests are made. So we have this first one, and then there's this second one because the variables changed. But then after that, it looks like those have been cached. So that's great. It's not making that request again. All right, so this is pretty good, right? Like we can change which image URL we're requesting via variable. But it's got a bit of a problem that you might have noticed already. We're not limited by the actual styles that exist, right? Like I can request not a real image, right? And it gives me a URL, but if I was to request that in here, and if I just change it to not a real image, you'll see that the image that it tries to load, isn't good. But now that it tries to load a good URL that works, but when it's trying to load not a real image, I mean, it's not a surprise that it's, not a good URL. So we can actually do something about that. We can use an enum to define what are the valid image sizes. So let's do that. Let's just call it image size. Okay, and then we have original, and we have small. All right. And so if we make this image size, okay, and then we default used image size to image size original, okay. Let's see if that compiles. Take a look at our schema definition. Okay, we reload. All right, so now the argument is this other parameter, and you can see that it's these definite options. So if I try to query not a real image, you can see now I'm getting a validation error. But if I do small, search small, string doesn't match fetched image. Oh, it looks like there's a problem in the actual query. So string type doesn't match. No, it's in the query again. So this should be image size. Okay. The problem was here in the query. So I had it listed as I had it defined as a string, but you can see that it's expecting an image size, and that's why I get this validation error. And that might even be on the client. All right, so there we are. Small, and then if I try to do something else, I get a validation error in the GraphQL resolver. So this is correct. This is actually coming from the server. Image size has an invalid value, etc. So, okay, but it would be nice if we could actually get that to validate on the client. So let's see if that's the case. So we do make apollo generate. Again, I had the problem here where I hadn't updated the type of the parameter in the client. Okay, so now that works. We take a look at image query. This is an image size. This is now defined in the global, and you can see that there's two possible values, and it's an enum. So let's take a look at Yep, so this, you can't assign a string here, so this needs to be image size. Okay. Public state image size small. And then this needs to be updated, so I'm actually going to use the multi-update option. So let's take that, image size dot, then we take out the string. All right, so this should compile now. Okay. Cool. And now this is reloading correctly. And so if I try to add an invalid type here, let's see, if I, so it's not really possible, right? So like it has to be an image size. I can't, it won't compile if I say something else, right? Like I can't even get the application to recompile. It won't build. And there's no other options here. Like if I do something else here, right? I can't do that. So in this way, like you can allow the server to define what the actual style options are. This could be really useful. Imagine you're adding style options, but you're not sure like which ones are available on the server yet. You just have to look at the schema, and if you're regenerating your types using Apollo, you don't even necessarily have to view the schema directly. You can program against the types that are generated from it, and I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, that's my demonstration. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I hope that you found this to be helpful. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.